Dust filled Sergeant Eva Rostova's mouth. It tasted like old concrete and something metallic. Maybe blood. Her blood. She tried to push herself up, but a searing pain shot through her left arm, making her gasp and fall back against the broken slab of wall. She risked a glance down. The arm bent at an angle that was sickeningly wrong. Broken. Definitely broken. Her head throbbed with a dull, heavy ache, like someone was squeezing her skull. Moving her eyes made spots dance in her vision. Concussion, probably. She was trapped in the guts of what used to be Hab Block Delta. Now, it was just a tomb of twisted metal beams, shattered synth glass, and powdered building materials. Sunlight cut through holes in the collapsed ceiling, lighting up clouds of drifting dust like tiny, angry ghosts. Outside these beams of light, shadows clung thick and heavy. And in those shadows, something moved. Click. Hiss. Scrape. The sounds echoed slightly in the ruined space, making Ava's skin crawl despite the grit covering it. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head just enough to see. It stood near the jagged opening where a door used to be, easily 8 feet tall. The Cathar executioner. Its body was covered in segmented plates of natural armor, the color of dark, wet stone. Long, thin limbs ended in wicked claws that scraped lightly on the floor as it shifted its weight. Its head was narrow, with multiple eyes like polished black beads that scanned the wreckage with cold, calm attention. It held no obvious weapon, because it was the weapon. Eva remembered the blur of the fight, her pulse rifle spitting uselessly against its tough hide, her own movements, honed by years of training, feeling clumsy and slow compared to its unnatural speed. She'd managed to score a hit near its shoulder joint with her combat knife, a move that should have crippled a human soldier. But the Cathar had barely flinched before backhanding her across the room. That's when the wall had decided to fall on her. Now, her rifle was gone, buried somewhere under the rubble. Her knife lay several feet away, its blade glinting mockingly in a patch of sun. All she had left was the throbbing pain in her head, the useless agony of her arm, and the overwhelming exhaustion that made her eyelids feel like lead weights. Click, hiss. The Cathar took a step closer. It moved with a horrible grace, like a giant insect made of knives and rock. There was no anger in its movements, no rush, just steady, patient, methodical. It knew she was hurt. It knew she was trapped. Its multiple eyes fixed on her, unblinking. It probably saw her shallow breathing, the slight tremor in her good hand. Assessing, calculating. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of her exhaustion. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was pest control, and she was the pest. She tried to push herself back, scraping against the rough concrete, but the movement sent fresh waves of pain through her arm and head. A pathetic whimper escaped her lips. The Cathar paused, tilting its narrow head slightly. Was it curious? No, that wasn't right. There was no feeling in its posture. It was like watching a machine analyze data. It probably registered the sound as a sign of weakness, confirmation that the hunt was over. It took another deliberate step forward, its shadow stretching long and thin across the debris towards her. Then, with a movement too fast to follow properly, one of its limbs shot out, not to strike, but to pin. Its claws clamped down hard on her remaining combat boot, anchoring her firmly in place. The pressure was immense, trapping her foot against the rubble. It lowered its head slightly, its dark eyes seeming to drink her in. This was it. The end. Trapped, broken, and about to be finished off by a creature that probably didn't even register her as anything more than an obstacle removed. The Cathar raised another limb, its claws extended, aiming for her throat with chilling precision. Defeat washed over Eva, heavy and absolute. There was nothing left to do. Pain was a roaring fire inside Ava's head, and her broken arm felt like jagged glass grinding against bone. Every breath hurt. Defeat wasn't just a thought. It was a heavy blanket smothering her, thick and suffocating. This was how it ended, pinned like an insect specimen, waiting for the final blow. A blurry image flashed behind her eyes. Sergeant Major Davies, clapping her on the shoulder after basic training, his gruff voice saying, "You got grit, Rostova. Don't ever lose it." Well, grit wasn't enough today. Logic screamed that survival was impossible. Her body was broken, her weapon gone. The Cathar was just too strong, too fast. Acceptance felt cold and bleak. The Cathar executioner seemed satisfied with her lack of resistance. Its multiple eyes blinked slowly, a motion that somehow felt mechanical, not biological. It held her pinned effortlessly. The limb poised to strike her throat didn't move immediately. It was waiting, perhaps for some internal signal, or maybe just savoring the complete control it had. It even shifted its stance slightly, its attention perhaps already drifting past her, towards securing the rest of the ruined hab block. It saw her as finished, a problem already solved. Then, with a casual scrape of its clawed foot, the Cathar nudged something lying near Eva's head. It was her helmet. Not a hard kick, just a dismissive push, like flicking away trash. The helmet rolled a few inches, coming to rest face up, its scratched visor reflecting the dusty light. Something inside Eva snapped. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a plan. It was pure, raw instinct. A feeling exploded deep in her chest, hot and furious. The disrespect, the cold, alien contempt, to be brushed aside like nothing. No, no! A jolt, sharp and fierce like sticking a fork in an electrical socket, shot through her body. It wasn't pain exactly. It was energy. A strange, buzzing warmth spread like wildfire down her spine, into her limbs, even reaching the broken one. The roaring fire in her head didn't disappear, but it suddenly seemed muffled, distant, like hearing it through thick walls. The sharp edges of the agony in her arm dulled into a throbbing ache she could almost ignore. The sounds of the Cathar, the soft clicks and hisses, faded slightly, while the frantic pounding of her own heart grew thunderously loud in her ears. Her vision narrowed, the edges blurring, focusing with laser-like intensity on the dark shape of the alien looming over her. The dust motes dancing in the light seemed to slow down. Time itself felt like it was stretching, becoming thick like syrup. Her breathing, shallow and weak moments before, hitched. A gasp tore from her throat, ragged and loud in the sudden quiet focus of her senses. Her eyes, which had been dull with pain and exhaustion, snapped wide open. They fixed on the Cathar, and if the alien could understand human expressions, it might have seen something new flicker there. Not fear, but a wild, animal spark, a dangerous light returning to eyes that should have been closing for the last time. The Cathar registered the gasp, its head tilting a fraction. A death rattle, a final spasm. It likely dismissed it as the last flickerings of a dying organism. It couldn't have been more wrong. The Cathar didn't even have time to process the change. One moment, the human female was dying beneath its claw. The next, she erupted. With a guttural yell that was pure animal rage, Eva twisted violently. She ignored the scream of protest from her broken arm, the jarring agony, as bone likely grated on bone. The limb flopped uselessly, but her core, her legs, her good right arm, they moved with a speed that defied her injuries. She slammed her good fist, knuckles first, not at the Cathar's armored body, but straight up into the cluster of its sensitive, bead-like eyes. There was a wet, crunching sound. The Cathar let out a high-pitched shriek, a sound utterly unlike its previous calm clicks and hisses. It recoiled instinctively, its head snapping back, the limb holding her boot momentarily loosening its grip in sheer shock and pain. That was all Eva needed. She yanked her foot free, ignoring the scrape of boot against claw. Scrambling backward over the rubble, she moved like a cornered animal, low, fast, desperate. Pain was a background hum, a dull drumbeat beneath the roaring symphony of adrenaline in her veins. Her mind wasn't thinking in complex tactics. It was screaming simple commands. Move, survive, hurt it. The Cathar recovered quickly, shaking its head. Several of its eyes were dark, ruptured, leaking a thick, black fluid. Its previous calm certainty was gone, replaced by visible fury and confusion. It lunged, not with calculated precision this time, but with raw, angered speed. Its claws slashed through the air where Eva had been a split second before. She dove behind a large chunk of collapsed wall, her good hand scrabbling, searching the debris. Her fingers closed around something hard and jagged, a piece of broken pipe, about 2 feet long, sharp at one end. Not much, but better than nothing. The Cathar rounded the chunk of wall, its remaining eyes burning with cold fire. It swiped again, a horizontal slash meant to cut her in two. Eva threw herself flat, the claws whistling inches above her head, showering her with dust and small bits of concrete. She rolled, coming up onto her knees, and lunged forward, inside the Cathar's reach. Using her good arm, she swung the jagged pipe like a club, aiming for the Cathar's thinner leg joints. The blow connected with a solid thwack. It wasn't enough to break the limb, but the alien hissed again, stumbling slightly. Its balance, usually so perfect, was thrown off. It tried to stomp down on her, but she was already moving, scrambling away again, using the chaotic landscape of the ruined Hablock as cover. This wasn't a fight the Cathar understood. Its tactics were based on overwhelming strength, speed, and the predictable reactions of prey, giving in to fear or injury. It expected calculated defense, attempts to flee along logical paths, or eventual surrender. It did not expect this berserker fury. It couldn't predict the pain-fueled bursts of speed, the willingness to get hurt in order to inflict harm, the sheer unreasonable refusal to die. Eva felt like she was watching herself from a distance. Her body moved on autopilot, fueled by the fire inside. She could feel impacts, bumping against rubble, scraping her knees, but they didn't truly register as pain. Her focus was absolute. The alien, its movements, its weaknesses. She saw now the spot on its shoulder where her knife had struck earlier. The armor there was slightly scarred, maybe weakened. The Cathar charged again, crashing through smaller piles of debris like they were made of paper. It was faster, stronger, but it was also becoming predictable in its rage. It relied on powerful, straightforward attacks. Eva, smaller and more agile even with her injuries, darted between pillars of wreckage, forcing the larger alien to maneuver awkwardly. She needed an edge, a real one. Her eyes scanned the surroundings frantically. Twisted metal beams, shattered consoles, dangling wires sparking occasionally. The Cathar cornered her against a large, overturned piece of machinery, humming faintly with residual power. Its remaining eyes narrowed. It lowered its stance slightly, preparing for a final, decisive pounce. There was nowhere left to run this time. Eva gripped the pipe tightly. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline was still singing in her blood, but she could feel the edges of exhaustion trying to creep back in. This was it. One last chance. As the Cathar lunged, claws outstretched, Eva didn't try to dodge sideways. Instead, she dropped low and pushed forward off the humming machine with her legs. She drove the jagged end of the pipe with all her adrenaline-fueled might, not at the charging alien's body, but at the weakened spot on its shoulder she'd noticed earlier. The impact jarred her entire body. The pipe punched through the slightly damaged armor with a sickening lick sound. Black fluid spurted. The Cathar screamed again, a sound choked with agony and disbelief. It staggered backward, clutching at its shoulder. Its lunge was ruined, its balance completely gone. It tripped over a low piece of debris, falling heavily onto its back with a tremendous crash that shook the floor. Its limbs flailed for a moment, trying to right itself, its movements suddenly clumsy and uncoordinated. Ava stood panting, leaning heavily on the overturned machine, the broken pipe still clutched in her fist, dripping with the Cathar's dark fluid. The alien was down, hurt. Its aura of unstoppable power was shattered. The fight wasn't over, but the impossible had happened. The tide had turned. The Cathar lay on its back amidst the rubble, thrashing like an overturned beetle. The jagged pipe was still embedded deep in its shoulder, black ichor pulsing weakly around the wound. It clawed at the pipe with one of its free limbs, but its movements were jerky, panicked. The calculated killer was gone, replaced by a creature consumed by pain and confusion. Its remaining eyes darted around wildly, unable to properly focus on Eva. Eva watched, leaning heavily against the humming machine, gasping for breath. The fire inside her was starting to flicker, the edges of the adrenaline rush beginning to fray. Sharp needles of pain were piercing through the numbing haze around her broken arm. Her head throbbed violently, and spots danced in her vision again, more insistently this time. The incredible energy that had flooded her moments ago was draining away fast, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its place. She knew she didn't have long before she collapsed completely. She had to finish this, now. Her eyes scanned the ground near the fallen alien. There, glinting in a patch of light, not 5 feet from the struggling Cathar, was her combat knife. Pushing off the machine, she stumbled forward. Each step jarred her broken body, sending fresh waves of agony through her arm and head. The world seemed to tilt slightly. She ignored it. Tunnel vision locked onto the knife, then onto the struggling alien. The Cathar saw her coming. It let out a choked hiss and tried to scramble upright, but the shoulder wound and its position made it awkward. It swiped blindly with a clawed hand, but Eva swayed clumsily out of its reach. She scooped up the knife, its familiar weight settling into her good hand. She lunged forward, putting the last dregs of her unnatural strength into it. The Cathar twisted, trying to bring its claws to bear, but it was too slow, too damaged. Eva drove the knife down, aiming for the softer underside of its neck, a spot she'd only glimpsed during their earlier struggle. The blade sank deep. The Cathar didn't scream this time. A violent shudder ran through its entire body. Its limbs spasmed, then went rigid, its remaining eyes fixed on Eva, but there was no anger or pain in them now. There was only blankness, a profound biological shock, as if its systems simply couldn't compute what had happened. It had been defeated by prey that refused to act like prey. It had been overwhelmed not by superior force, but by something illogical, something its cold equations couldn't account for. The raw, desperate power of a cornered human refusing to break. Then, with a final shuddering exhale, the Cathar went utterly still. Silence crashed down, thick and heavy, broken only by Eva's ragged breathing and the faint hum of the damaged machine behind her. The dust began to settle slowly in the beams of light. The knife slipped from Eva's nerveless fingers, clattering onto the floor. The adrenaline fled her system like air rushing from a punctured lung. Suddenly, the full weight of her injuries slammed into her. Her legs gave out. She crumpled to the ground beside the dead alien, landing heavily on her side. Pain, sharp and blinding, exploded behind her eyes. Her broken arm screamed. Nausea churned in her stomach. She lay there gasping, surrounded by the wreckage and the body of the alien killer she had somehow defeated. Every inch of her hurt. She was bleeding, broken, and utterly spent. But she was alive. A single, ragged sound tore from her throat. It might have been a sob, or maybe a harsh, disbelieving laugh. She didn't know. She closed her eyes for just a second, the gritty reality of survival washing over her. She had faced the executioner. She had been broken. And then, something deep inside, something primal and human, had refused to let that be the end. She was alive. And for now, that was enough. That was everything.